Hello. It's Wednesday and time for another live stream. In this one, we're going to be talking more about the itag-yoke and how to manage the yoke. That's the beginning point because we're knitting top down. The itag-yoke is a knit along that we're doing on Ravelry by me, Suzanne Bryan. If you're not working on that, you're free to join us in this conversation because we're talking about yokes in general on a top-down sweater. And there's lots to learn. It's a very great area for adding design and elements, but it can also be very complicated. So that's going to be our general conversation today, how to work a yoke from the top down. So welcome. Hi. Glad to see you all here. So let's see who's here. David Hensley, Claudia Rivera, Shobo Singh, and Elaine Homestead, Francoise Monroe, Demetria, Bonnie Davis, Lizanne, Pamela Matthews, Joyce Nougat, Anne Tremoliers. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Janice Mason, Sylvia Earle, Nina Kellen, Dolores Cowell, Pamela Jean, Mary Inman, Nina, Michelle Lindgren, Susan McBride, and a whole bunch more people. So we have a lot to talk about today, but mostly answering your questions, although I am going to show you some information that might be new to help you clarify starting. How do you start your yoke? That's the hardest part. Because when you're designing your own garment, you can't just cast on and start knitting because you're not following a pattern. You're actually creating it as you're going. I'm giving you guidelines. I'm giving you parameters to work within, but the pattern yourself, you're going to be creating it out of your imagination. And swatching. Yay, swatching. So there's some questions up here already. I'm going to answer a few of those. We'll come back to more intermittently as we go along. So David Hensley says, question, do you, me, only knit garments or do you also knit dishcloths, toys, ornaments, etc.? I knit a lot of garments. I do knit some shawls once in a while, but I don't wear them. So I've kind of cut back on the number of shawls I wear, knit, not wear, because I don't know how to put them on my body so that they look good. They always just make me look like an old lady. So this next guild meeting that we're going to have, we're going to talk, or one of our guild meetings, we're going to talk about how to put a shawl on, how to make it look good. So that might help me a bit. I do knit toys. I love to knit dolls and animals for my grandchildren. They're really, really fun. I knit a lot of socks. I don't knit dishcloths, but I do knit swatches, which are kind of like dishcloths. I knit lots and lots of swatches. Everything I do, all the videos that I make, everything I practice on swatches. I have a lot of swatches. This is the last one I made on the intarsia in the round. And I probably won't ever finish it. It's just the beginning so that I could show how to do the technique. I've already pulled out one of the needles, so then cut the yarn. And then, of course, there's my big swatch for the sweater that we're working on right now. That's a swatch. If I were smart, I would have knitted a little bit bigger, and I could have made it into a hat. It's not quite big enough to be a hat, but that's a consideration if you'd like to wear hats. So, and then Shoba says, hi, Suzanne, I'm addicted to your stream and so excited to be catching it live today. Maybe because of your time change, it starts in India at 12:30 a.m., much better than my 1:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. on Sunday. I'm so sorry that it's in the middle of the night. Oh my goodness, but I'm so glad you get to watch live. Yay. Hello. Dimitri, I'll be driving okay, she's going to be driving, but she'll listen. And Pamela Matthews says, this is the best lunch break of the week. It is kind of fun to meet up like this, like we have our little knitting group here, right? Okay, questions. Let me look through. I think that was just the one so far. Everybody's waiting to see what we're going to talk about. Oh, Amanda Swanson says, yes, the April Guild meeting is how to wear your shawl. I think that that's going to be good for me because I have a closet full of them and I never wear them. This is what I do. I knit a lot, you know. I probably knit about 5 sweaters a year. I think that's my average. And I have drawers full of sweaters. I can't possibly wear them all. So about once a year, I go through them. I have my daughter and my daughter-in-law come over and they just pick what they want and they take what they want. And that leaves me with what they don't want. But sometimes those are my favorites. And then I knit more. So, and I knit sweaters for my son-in-law, my son, my husband. So there's plenty of people to knit. And my granddaughters. My grandson, he is going to be 20 this year, and he's not real interested in my knitting yet, but maybe someday he will, because I'd love to knit a sweater for him, but he doesn't like sweaters, so he doesn't wear them. So I did some things today. I think that this is just like when we did the itag cardigan. I threw out the philosophy, the theory of raglan knitting, and then everybody goes, oh my God, where do we start? And that's what's happened this time too. So what I'm going to do is start at the beginning, and I started with my sweater. First of all, I want to show you what I do. I make a swatch. And as I told you before, this one I cast on down here, and I'm getting 7 stitches to the inch, and then I went right into the pattern that I want to use on my yoke using the same needles. And you can see that it pulled in quite a bit. This has been blocked now. The last time I showed it, it hadn't been blocked yet. Now it's been blocked. You can see that the stranded knitting pulls in, and that is to be expected, okay, because of the stranding. Let's look at the inside. So here's the inside. You can see the stranding. And that is what pulls it in. So typically when you're working stranded knitting, the gauge might be slightly different from each one stitch pattern to another, depending on how often you change from one color to the other. But typically, stranded stitches are squarer than regular knitting stitches. Regular knitting stitches are rectangular, right? Let's say you get 5 stitches to the inch, you usually get about 7 rows to the inch, okay? So that means a stitch is rectangular, it's not square. So down here, I'm getting 7 stitches to the inch. When I move up here to the stranded, I'm getting 8. I'm getting the same rows per inch that I got on my non-stranded, but instead of getting 7 stitches to the inch, I'm getting 8. So they're less rectangular and more square. They may not be exactly square, but they're more square. So that means they pull in this way. Now it's right side up. So when I got up to here, I kind of measured my gauge. I was getting 7 stitches to the inch here. I'm getting 8 stitches to the inch here. So in the very last row of my stranded knitting, I decreased, or in the row after, I decreased 1 stitch per inch. So now I have 1 stitch. I still am getting 7 stitches per inch here, but that was a stitch equivalency. I want the equivalent width of fabric. If it takes 8 stitches to make 1 inch here, I need to know how many stitches I need to change to make 1 inch here. I need 7, so I need to decrease 1 stitch, because if it stays at 8, like it did down here, it's going to pooch out. And you'll often see this in yoke sweaters. You'll see where they have a stranded design or color work in them. They'll come down to this part, and then right here, it'll be kind of pokey. It'll pooch out a little bit. You'll see gathers across there. And that's not from an increase round. It's from not compensating for the change in stitch gauge. So there's 2 ways to compensate for changes in stitch gauge. I just demonstrated one. That is changing the stitch count. So let's say that this is 12 inches in diameter. I want this to stay 12 inches in diameter. This is probably 13 inches in diameter down here. I'm just guessing. So that's one way. The other way is to change the size of needle you're using, okay? So let's say I'm getting 7 stitches to the inch here, and I know this is going to pull in on this size needle. I used a US, let's say I used a US 4, then I might need to go up to a 5 to make this work. And guess what you'd have to do? You'd have to swatch that. So I did this, and to tell you the truth, I didn't feel like re-swatching it on a different needle size, so I just changed my stitch count. But I also like this fabric. I like the fabric on the size 4 needle. And this is the fabric that I want to use for my sweater. Remember when we were doing our initial swatches? Now look here, this is really interesting by me doing that. We know stranded knitting is less flexible, right? It's the same flexibility lengthwise because nothing changes in stranded knitting lengthwise. There's no change. The rows are the rows. It's going to give you the same stretch as this does down here. In fact, if we stretch it like this, see, it all stretches evenly. Can you see that? But if we stretch it from side to side, see how easily that stretches? Watch the stranded. It hardly changes. I'm really pulling on it. Okay, so it has less give. Remember when we did the Starry Starry Night socks and how big the socks look before you put them on? That's because they're not going to stretch when you put them on your foot. So they need to be the actual size of your foot rather than smaller like you would do in normal socks, how you knit them with negative ease. Stranded socks need to be knitted with 0 ease. You need to take this account in your sweater too. If you were doing a sweater that had negative ease in this part, you would want to knit this even bigger because it's going to really have negative ease. It would be tight around your body. This would be good if you want to suck in your gut. You could do this around the abdomen and it would work like a girdle. That's how tight it is. Okay, it doesn't give like this. So that's something to take into consideration for stranded knitting. So anyway, that's the first thing you have to do is swatch, right? And figure those things out and figure out stitch equivalency. That's what we're talking about here, whether it's lace, mosaic knitting, stranded knitting, knit purl combinations. You still have to make sure you're getting the same stitches or make adjustments so that you get the same circumference, because here what is the most important thing is the circumference. So whatever it takes to maintain an even circumference, that's what you need to do. You can either keep the circumference even by changing your stitch count or by changing your needle size. Those are the two ways. Once you've done that, the next thing to do is figure out by Ann Budd's book or by the knit along document how many stitches you want to cast on for the neck. And then figure out by measuring your body how many stitches you're going to have at the lower portion of the yoke. And then you need to know the difference between the two. For my example with my stitch gauge, I cast on 120 stitches for my neck. And then I'm going to need, and I have my little book here, my bullet journal. I left 4 pages in here for writing about this sweater for my own. I'm going to need at the bottom of my sweater, well, let's start up here. I'm starting with a 16-inch neck. And then at the bottom of my yoke, it's going to be 58.56 inches around. And then I convert that to stitches by using my stitch gauge, okay? So I ended up I'm going to have 120 stitches here, and I'm going to have 410 stitches. The bottom of this yoke is right here. This is where the yoke stops. It's where the underarm is. See that? Here's the underarm seam right here. Here's the last yoke around. Now, and then you have to know the difference between those stitch counts from the cast on to the bottom of the yoke. It's just a big circle, right? For me, the difference in the stitch count was 290 stitches. Now you can use Ann Budd's method in her book. She breaks it into 4 parts. So you actually have 4 increase rounds. In my knit along document, I break it into 3 parts. And it's personal preference and depends on the size of the little motifs that you want to put in. Of course, if you break it into 5 segments, like 4 increase rounds, that gives you 5 segments, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, it gives you 5 segments. Then you have to have narrower design elements to fit in the segments if you're doing that type of design. If you divide it, you have 3 increase rounds, it gives you 4 segments. You have much wider segments to fit your design elements in. The end result, no one would be able to tell whether you divided this area between here and here into 4 or 5 segments. No one's going to be able to tell by looking at your sweater, okay? It's personal preference. I'm using 3, I'm having 3 increase rounds. And I also talked to you before that you really want to have all of your increases between your neck, somewhere in here, and here, 1/2 the distance. So the half the distance is from here, your neck, to here, okay? Divide that in half, and it's actually about right here. You want to have all of your increases, in my personal opinion, and based upon research that I've done, by the tip of the shoulder. So if I want to have 3 increases, there'd be 1, 2, 3. By the time I'm here, I should have the same number of stitches that I will have here. They're not going to increase anymore from here to here. This is what allows the yoke to make a circle. Now you can see this yoke doesn't do that, can't you? Can you see how it bunches up here when I raise my arms up? Because the increases in this yoke are worked much further out. And so what happens is there isn't room for your arms to raise up. And you can see what it does to my sweater. See how it's raising my whole sweater? I'm just going to take my arm up to be parallel with the floor. Do you see what happened to my sweater here? See how it's pulling it up? Also, on this particular sweater, and I followed it for my size, I think the underarm is a little bit too low. I think I would prefer to have it a little bit higher. Wherever your underarm ends, let's say see my real underarm is up here. Can you see that? The underarm of the sweater is down here. My underarm is here. It's about 1 inch higher. That inch means if I had my underarm here and I raised my arm up, see it doesn't raise the sweater up? Watch my sweater right here, this part. Okay, so if I put the underarm in my underarm and then I raise my arm up, the sweater doesn't move. But if I put the underarm 1 inch lower, that's just 1 inch, watch what happens when I raise my arm up. See how it's pulling the whole sweater up? Do you see that? Whereas if I had the underarm in my underarm, it's not doing that. So these are just little considerations. Now, in a yoke sweater that you're knitting top down, it's really cool because you can actually try it on while you're knitting. And when you get to the point where you think your underarm is going to be, that's where you stop the yoke. You just stop there. Even if your plan meant that it needed to be a little bit longer, I would stop there. Or if your plan ends up here and you aren't down to your underarm yet, just continue knitting some more rounds. There won't be any more increases because all of your increases are up in this part, right? You just continue knitting some more rounds until you get to your underarm. Now in Ann Budd's book, she uses 2 inches for the underarm width for most of the sizes up until she gets to the larger sizes, and then she jumps from 2 inches to 3 inches. I use 8%, which I get from Priscilla Gibson Roberts, and I like that, but her book, she can't really do that because she'd have a different directions for every single size. The reason she does the 2 inches is she can maintain her math from one size to the other. And it's not that big of a difference, but for my size in Ann Budd's book, she uses 2 inches. When I figured it out based upon my 8%, mine comes out to 3.25 inches per underarm. And when I was describing on Ravelry the other day, that does make a difference in how many stitches you end up with your yoke, because some of the stitches that are going to be for your body are generated when you cast on those stitches under the arm. The more stitches you cast on under the arm, the less you have to have in the yoke, but the circumference is exactly the same. You're not changing your chest circumference or your upper arm circumference. It's a difference. Mine's a difference of between, it's like 5 inches between the underarm for the body, the underarm for the sleeve, underarm for the body, and the other underarm for the sleeve. It makes about a 5-inch difference from Ann Budd's book. So, you know, for if you've never ever knit a yoke sweater before, go with Ann Budd's book, and then next time try my system or vice versa so that you can see the difference. Okay, and it's not that big of a difference, but sometimes it can make a difference in how your sweater fits. So now we've done the first step. We've figured out how many stitches we're going to have at the start, how many we're going to have down here. Right, that's what I'm talking about. The next decision is, how are you going to fit your stitch patterns in? So there's several ways to do that, and I drew them up here using my trusty whiteboards. So the first method, this is your neck, and the black line is the first increase round one. And this is using my method from the Knit Along documents. Then the second increase round is round 2. The third increase round is here, and that's half the distance from here to the outside of the yoke, which I put in dots, okay? So the first line is your first increase round after the cast on. Let me draw the cast on in here, because that's a little bit misleading. Okay, I put the cast on in red. Can you see it? And the first increase round is shortly thereafter, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Then you knit for a distance, about 1/4 of the total yoke depth. And then you do your next increase round. You knit another 1/4, the third and final increase round. So once you've done this increase round, you have the same number of stitches in this round that you're going to have out here. The stitch count does not change. That is what's most confusing to people. So this is about halfway from the neck to the edge of the yoke, and this corresponds to the outside edge of your shoulder. So and if you look at your body, you can see your body goes out straight this way, and then it goes down this way, right? So really, all of the increases should be out here to keep the circle flat at this point. And then they continue down here, so that not the increases, but you need your total number of stitch count so you don't get the mummy effect. Somebody was talking about that, feeling like you have the mummy effect. You do have the mummy effect a little bit in the Zweig sweater. See, I pull out to about here, and I start feeling like I'm pulling. In fact, you can watch on my sweater here. I get out to here, then it starts pulling up. My sweater's coming up. See that? That's a combination of the underarm being an inch too low for me, and there's still increases happening below the edge of the shoulder. So I'm not getting enough, I don't have enough stitches here for my arms to fit in it properly. I'm not criticizing this sweater. I obviously love it because I knitted it and I'm wearing it. I absolutely love it. But if I were knitting my own sweater, I might make some changes. So this is the method of dividing your stitches into circles, right? The other method is the wedge method. And what you do here is you have your initial cast on, and you can do your initial increase round right there. Then you would divide your design into wedges based upon the stitch pattern you want to use, and the increases would fall on these lines. And by the time you got to this dotted line right here, you're not going to make increases on this line, But by the time you get to that line, you should have all of the increases finished. And from here to here, there are no increases, although your stitch pattern can certainly continue down here. The third way to do it is a combination. And this is what I'm doing on my sweater. So I have my initial increase round. I'm working 2 1/4 inches, and then I'm doing a second increase round. And then instead of having my third increase round out here, I'm distributing what would have been in this increase round, the number of stitches increased, which in my case is 110. I'm going to increase 110 stitches between here and here, but I'm evenly distributing them on these lines, so that by the time I get to this point here, I have all of my stitches. My design will continue, though, through here. Okay, now the very last thing that I want to talk about in this is, where should you finish the design? How far should your design come down? It's up to you. If it's circular like this, I think it should end about 1 inch above your armhole. Because if it comes right down to the armhole, let's say my armhole, well, here, it'll pull the design into your armpit, and you don't really want that. So if it's a circular elements like this, I would finish it about 1 inch above your total yoke depth, which is your underarm. If you're making a wedge shape, it can come down, but I wouldn't make it go into the underarm. So you need to pay attention where your underarm is going to be in relationship to your design. But let's say you want your design to come down like this. It can certainly come down past the yoke, but you would not be making any increases there, okay? All of the increases would be up here. So this is mine so far. Let me show you what I've done. I'll put it on. I have it on 2 needles so I could get it over my head. So here's my neck so far. I've done my short row shaping. I did 1 inch of short row shaping in the back. So I cast on, the red is my cast on. I cast on using the crochet cast on. I did a provisional cast on, crochet cast on, and I cast on 120 stitches. And I'm going to come back later and add a corrugated ribbing to my neck here. So I wanted to leave space for that, right? So if I have about 1 inch of corrugated ribbing, then it's going to come up to this part of my neck. Can you see that? Then I'm going to have a steek. So I added steek stitches. I have 1 inch worth of steek stitches right here, and that's not part of the provisional cast on. The provisional cast on is just my neck, because when I come back, I'm just going to pick up those stitches to knit the neck. I'm not going to pick up my steek stitches. It will have already been cut, and those steek stitches will be put behind. So the steek stitches really shouldn't be part of your provisional cast on. I just cast on extra stitches so that with my working yarn. So I have my provisional cast on, then I knit 1 round so that I have 1 round in my yellow yarn to work with. In Ann Budd's directions, she says to start the increase round right after the provisional cast on. But depending on what type of increases you want to do, it limits you. For example, it's hard to do make 1 increases or lifted increases from the provisional cast on, because it's going to really mess you up when you try to take that provisional cast on off and pick up stitches. So I think having 1 round of normal stitches helps you if you're going to be coming back and taking that provisional cast on off. Then you have a nice round of stitches to pick up from. Then I did my short row shaping. So I added about 1 inch, and it comes around. I brought it around. I divided the front into thirds, and the short row shaping extends. Its furthermost point is here, and then it's the shortest row is here. Now, I don't know which is better, and I'm going to have to experiment whether you want to start with the shortest row and go to the longest, or start with the longest, then go with the shortest. I started with the shortest and went to the longest, and I will give you a review on that, how I think about it. But right now, I like it. I have no problem with that, okay? Then I've knitted 2 more rounds. Oh no, then I did my increase round. So I cast on with provisional cast on, I knitted 1 round, then I did my short row shaping, and then I did my increase round. So at this point, I have 220 stitches on my needle. I started with 120. I almost doubled it. And let me show you in the back, you can see my short rows. And then this is the increase round right here. And I used make ones. And you have to figure out the ratio. So I went from 120 to 220. I added 100 stitches. So I divided, let me see what I did. Let me find my phone. I'll show you. I know I need to make 100 stitches. Okay, so I divided, let me get my phone on and my calculator. Come on. I'm getting everything but my calculator. I divided 120 divided by 100 equals 1.2. That tells me the difference between this stitch count and this stitch count. For every stitch here, there's 1.2 stitches here. Is that right? No. It gives, okay, I need to increase by my brain just stopped working. Okay. So I have 100 stitches here. I want to add, I have 120 stitches here. I want to add 100 here. So I divided 120 by 100 and I got 1.2. That means I'm going to make an increase per stitch, 111.2. So 0.2 times 5 is 1, right? So that means every time I did 5 stitches, I skipped making an increase. So I did stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, stitch. So it means I have to have 6 stitches of here, 6 stitches on this, and 5 stitches here that I make increases with. So I'm making an increase per stitch 5 times. And then I have my 6th stitch left over. That's the 0.2 times 5. That gives me a 6. So for every 6 stitches here, I increased 5 here. And you just have to figure out that ratio. Now somebody pointed out that there are calculators online where you can put in the difference that you want to make, and it tells you how often you need to make your increases. One thing I do is once I know that I need to make an increase, 5 increases out of 6 stitches, I do something like this. I'll put my 5 stitches on this side. I mean my 6 stitches. This is where I already have my stitches. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And I know I need to pick up 5 of those 6 stitches. Or I want to increase. So I'm going to make a stitch, and then I'm going to make an increase. A stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase. And there's 1 stitch left over. I've made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 increases. This is the 6th stitch over, so I just make another stitch. Stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase. There's 5 increases for the 6 stitches. And then I repeat it for this one. I always mark up 2 inches because it makes, you can see the pattern that way. So here I have 5 increases also. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we notice from 1 inch to the next, there's 2 stitches next to each other without an increase, right? So I'm going stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch, increase, stitch. And the next inch will start with another stitch, okay? So that's what happened up here at the top. And you can see that there is no flaring. Do you see? So I went from in 1 inch here, I have 6 stitches. Up here, I have 11 in the same space, and you can see it does not cause flaring. But as this grows and I get more and more rows, I'll do this for another 2¼ inches up like this. I'm not going to add any stitches for the next 2¼ inches. Then I'll do another increase round. And then from that point forward, I'm going to add my stitch pattern. So how do you know where to put your stitch pattern? Do you want it up here? Do you want it here? Do you want it down here? I decided that I wanted it 1 inch above my armpit, the bottom of it to be 1 inch above my armpit. And this is 4 3/4 inches long total. So that makes it 5 3/4, and I'm going to have a 9-inch area to work in. So that leaves me 4 1/4 inches from here to before I start this. Do you see that? That's how I figured out where to start it. Also, you can just put it right up to you and see where do you want it to be. Now, something to keep in mind, the bottom of this yoke down here, the armpit starts in this stitch right here. So the really bottom of the yoke, do you see where it comes? You may not want to cut your bust exactly in half with a design. So you want to end it above, you want your design to end up above the midpoint of your bust. I don't think that it looks particularly good to cut your bust exactly in half, but that's where the bottom of this yoke actually comes on me, and each person is different. Remember when I had you measure from up here to where your bust points are? Mostly that is for when we're going to do changes for adding short rows for bust shaping. But also keep in mind, you do not want a significant element of your yoke to land right over your bust points. That's not real attractive. So just keep that in mind. This is another reason I like to knit really big swatches. I think this is going to be stunning. It's going to come around here. And then I'm going to repeat this part, just this part, down the front of my cardigan like this on either side of the button band, not all the way around. And in order to do that, I'm going to be using an intarsia method with the stranded knitting to just do my stranded knitting on either side. And then I'm just going to use this part of it around the bottom of my sweater and around the cuff. I think it's just going to be really pretty. So let's go back to see what we have some questions here. And then I have some written questions over there from Ravelry. So we've talked about, that's a lot, right? Okay. Answer David. Remember, if you want to ask me a question, put the word question in all caps. Anne Tremolier says she's knitting her itag cardigan shawl collar while she's listening. Yay! I can't wait to see it. And Leslie Dunn, please share with us how to wear a shawl when you find out. I've knit several and have no idea what to do with them. So I'm not the only person like that. Yes. Dolores Cowie, question. Will you reference any books today? Let's see. I could. I'll think about it. Yes, I'll think about that. Okay. Let's see. Alma Rose says, is it best if this is a person's first time knitting a sweater to draw up their own design or copy something? You can, personally, I think it's easier to find something in a stitch pattern book, and use that versus copying a sweater. Although many people seem to be wanting to do that, if you try to copy a sweater like something like this, I think it's going to give you a lot of extra math to try to make it work. It's easier just to start with something small and expand it. And I'll talk more about how I fit my pattern into here in a little bit. So yes, or just knit it plain. You can do a yoke just plain. It's okay to do that with no design in it whatsoever. In fact, it would be really pretty if you do where you do your increase rounds to use yarn overs. Just do a yarn over, and then it'll give you little eyelets where you did your increase rounds, and it'll be absolutely stunning. Another thing that you could do would be very, very pretty. Have you ever seen those little rows? Gosh, I'll be right back. I'm going to show you something. Sorry, this came up off the top of my mind. Think about it, and I wasn't prepared to show it. Okay, so this little design element right here, or any of these are just stacked. This is where you work a row of garter stitch, and then a knit two together, yarn over, knit two together, yarn over. Right here. This is two rows of it stacked. This does not create any increases. It just makes this cute little three-dimensional design. So, and this one down here, this one has two knits between. But if you look at this one, and they look the same right side up and upside down, we're looking at this row right here. This is a knit two together, yarn over, knit two together, yarn over, knit two together, yarn over. Isn't that cute? And if you do a row of garter stitch above it and below it, it's absolutely adorable. And something as simple as that would be really cute for someone knitting this for the first time. Just do that on. So you could do Ann Budd's method of having 4 increase rounds. So you'd have that 4 times. I wouldn't do the one right at the neck. You don't need it right there. And this has beads on it, by the way. You could put beads on yours too. And doing that's very cute. And I have a video in the itag-yoke playlist on how to add beads. That would be really cute, wouldn't it? I think that's a good first time one. Okay. Okay. Okay, Pat Gordon. Question, is it possible to increase the yoke in the first 2 to 5 rows? You mean spread out an increase round over 2 to 5 rows, or do all the increases in the first 2 to 5 rows? It is possible to spread out the increases over 2 to 5 rows of just one increase round. Yes, if you would like to do that. Now, a lot of people, when you're knitting with really big yarn like bulky or worsted weight, it will look like there's a lot of stitches there and like it's going to pucker, but it'll block out. Believe me, it'll block out. If you look at all those Lopi sweaters, they're all knit with, that's really bulky yarn. And when you're knitting it, you feel like you're going to have all this extra stitch. It blocks out lovely. Okay, don't worry about that. Now, Leslie Dunn and Bonnie Davis are talking about ladder back jacquard. I can make a video on that. And it's an interesting thing. When I do the video on the Intarsia stranded, I'll talk about the ladder back too, because it kind of, one is in place of the other. Okay, I will talk about that. Carolyn Nichols. Hi, Carolyn. How are you today? Can you show us how you use your journal? Oh, well, I'll tell you how I'm using my journal for my sweater. So way back when we decided to do this, I set up a page for it. So it's in the beginning of my journal. It's on page 14. And I put up at the top, itag-yoke. And then I've been putting my notes in here about my gauge swatch and my plan And I left myself 4 pages. Now, you might want to leave more than 4 pages if you've never knit a sweater before, because you're going to find that you're going to make a lot of notes. And before I used my bullet journal, I always used one of those little books that you get for essay writing and essays, for schools. The ones that are like, 15, 20 pages. I use those. I have one for every sweater that I've ever designed. And sometimes I have to write on the front and back of the cover too. I write so much in them, and I put my swatches in there, or pictures of my swatches in there. I have all my diagrams. I'm not going to look for one right now, but next time I'll bring one out and show it to you. Leslie Dunn, is it advantageous for larger people to use more increase rounds and smaller people to use fewer? Nope. It's just, it will work. It will work for you. Okay. S.E. White, Will Height. Question, is it possible to change other yoke patterns like your Zweig to make a circular yoke without the hanging armpit? Would I simply change the increase round to end at my shoulder? Right. You could do that. You can adjust the increase rounds. Yes. This is what I'm teaching you. We're learning knitting theory. So if you go through these processes with me, we started with the raglan cardigan. We're doing this one. Then the next one is going to be an Aran style. And the one after that will be, the Aran will be in the fall. And this time next year, we'll do the set-in sleeves. Once you learn the styles and how they fit your body and how to make the adjustments, all future sweaters that you knit, you can make those adjustments to those patterns because you'll know what fits your body. You don't have to make the standard because not very many people's bodies fit the standard. Okay, I know you found that out. When I go to the store, I have to buy long pants. They have to come in long. And I wear a size 10 or a size 12. And a lot of times long doesn't start till size 14 because they think most people that are taller are also bigger. Well, that doesn't work for me. So I have a really hard time finding pants that fit. So if I find a pair that fits, I buy like 3 or 4 of the same pair because I know it's going to be a long stretch before I find another pair of pants that fits. Same thing on sweaters. Now I made this Zweig is supposed to be long sleeve. I made it 3/4 length because I wanted to. It's okay. You can make the sleeves any length you want. Okay. Let's see. This is Mia Seriova. Question about your underarm. What if I would like to knit an oversized sweater? Isn't this the case of all oversized sweaters that the body part goes up when you raise your hands? A lot of times, yes, but this is not oversized. You can see this fits my arm exactly. There's like no ease in this arm. And the body, I think I have about 4 inches of ease here. But remember when you add, so if you want to knit an oversized sweater, there's 2 things you can do. One is just knit an overall bigger size. Just choose a size much larger than what you would normally wear. The other is to add ease to what you would wear. So let's say you just pick a larger size. If you just pick a larger size, everything's going to be bigger. The neck opening is going to be bigger. The armhole depth will be bigger. The length before you make changes to the body will be longer. Everything will be bigger relatively. If you just add ease, the only places you add ease is to the bust and the arms. You do not add ease to the armhole depth. You do not add ease to the neck. So if you want something that's just going to be looser on you but still sort of fit you, you might want to just go with adding ease. So you only add ease to the arm circumference and the bust circumference. That does not change the length of anything. For example, if you just knit one much bigger, your arms might end up coming out to here, If you're a real petite person and you knit let's say you would normally do like a size 36 and you knit like a size 54, your arms are going to come down to here, so you're constantly pushing them up your arm. But if you just want to have something with a lot more space in it, you might want to just add ease. But knit, so in Ann Budd's book, how do you do that? That's a great question. So using those parameters, This is page 33. Let's say you want to do a size 36, but you want to have enough ease for 54. You would knit all the circumferences for the 54, but you would knit all the lengths for the 36. So when it says to knit for the yoke, it might say to knit 2 inches here before you do an increase round, and it might say knit 3 inches here. So you would do the length here. Your underarm depth would stay the size for 36. Does that make sense? So you could do either one of those or a combination in between. So it's like a line, a continuum. This is the one where you start with size 36 and you just add ease. This is the one where you completely knit the size 54, but you can do anything in between. Okay, once you start learning about sweater construction and stuff like what we're doing, it frees up your mind and you can make these changes knowing that they'll work, that your sweater is not going to turn into a giant swatch. Okay? Okay. Question. 8% more than the cast on. Question. Janice Mason. Question. 8% more than the cast on. The 8% that I was talking about is the distance under the arm. It has nothing to do with the cast on. So I don't know what 8% you're talking about. You might have to restate that. And Amanda Swanson, who's much younger than I am, and in my knitting group, and she's very fashion conscious. She likes to wear clothing from the 50s. Actually, she's cute as can be. Amanda says, it's trendy to have that underarm low and sweater cropped for young people right now. So you can adjust that. Yes, you can make your underarm lower if you want, and you can make your sweater shorter if you want. It's okay. Yes, great point. The provisional cast on that I used the crocheted one. You can use any that you want. Okay, that's a crocheted provisional cast on. Okay, someone need Bernard. Okay, Bernard got deleted. Amanda, would you like to become an administrator? I'm gonna make you an administrator. Moderator. There you go. You're now a moderator, okay? Let me make sure. Yep, Amanda's a moderator. Lois, question, why is the provisional cast on better than a cable cast on? Well, it depends on what you're going to do. For example, on my sweater, that's a good question. On my sweater, I am going to come back and pick up from my provisional cast on and knit the neck up. And as I discussed on Ravelry, you can do it either way. You can start with your neck edge like this. Zweig has you start with the neck edge. You just cast on, you work the ribbing, and you go on. And you have no idea how the neck's going to look on you. You're hoping that it's going to look good. But a sweater hangs from the neck. The entire weight of a yoke sweater hangs from a neck. Now, if you're doing a Aran sweater that is knit straight across here, the entire weight of the sweater hangs on the shoulders. But that's not so in a yoke. In a yoke, the entire weight of the sweater, the arms, everything hangs on the neck. So let's say I didn't want this neck this big. I would actually like to have it more like this. After you've knit it with the provisional cast on there, all you have to do is take the provisional cast on off, which is what I'm going to do, pick up your stitches here and knit up this way. And you can actually decrease also. So if this got too big on you and you don't like that, you can actually put some decreases in there and pull the neck up nice to wherever you want it to be. It's much easier to adjust after the fact than at the beginning, but it is totally personal preference. If you want to cast on and work your neck ribbing right away, you can do that. It's okay to do that. It's just an option. It's a personal preference. Okay, let's see. It jumped up. Okay, question. This is from Anne. Question 1, are the 8% of Priscilla and Roberts Gibsons for everyone? 8% of the total chest stitches for the underarm? Yes, because that's relative. So let's say the bigger you are, the wider it is under your arm, right? The smaller you are, the smaller. So if you use 8%, it keeps it relative to your whole size. And when I design my own sweaters, I use the 8% rule. I do believe that Elizabeth Zimmerman also uses 8%. It's good. Ann Buds probably uses 8% in her own sweaters too, but when you're trying to write a book that has charts in it, it's easier to have a static number. 8% might give you 13.35 stitches. You know, a lot of people can't deal with that. They don't know what to do with that. So she just gives you a stitch count, and it's much easier for a book. But we're not doing a book. We're making our own individual sweater. The Kronbada question, what is the most invisible method of a make one? Well, make one is a certain type of increase. And a lot of people have grown up using the term make one to mean any increase. A make one is a type of increase. And I have videos in my on my other channel, Knitting with Suzanne Bryan, on make ones. There's a make one right, a make one left, and a make one open. The make one open makes a stitch that looks like a yarn over, an eyelet. The make one right causes fabric to lean to the right. Make one left causes the fabric to lean to the new stitch. Make one right makes the new stitch go to the right of the current stitch, and a make one left makes the new stitch go to the left of the current stitch. There are also lifted increases that are worked completely differently and are also fairly invisible. And then there are knit front and backs. That also makes an increase, but it looks better in ribbing or some sort of textured design. So it depends on what you want them to do. And guess what? Swatching is the answer there. Make a little swatch with your increases. See what you like. I have lots of increases over on my other channel. Okay. Now, for me personally, I'm using make ones, by the way. So let me show you my make ones. So this is the top and this is the bottom. So between every stitch here, there's a make one. I'll stretch it out. So you can't really see them, can you? They are very invisible. I like them. It just makes new stitches. Question 2 from Anne. I have a cable pattern that I want during all the yoke and after. I wanted some of the cables start during the ribbing, but must I do normal stockinette? No, you don't have to do normal stockinette in the short rows. You can continue your stitch pattern, of course. That would be wonderful. The only place the short rows affect is going to be the length of that part of your cable. But you can continue the cable and pattern during the short rows, yes. It's perfectly normal to do that. When you do your short row turns, wherever they end up, I would avoid doing them in the center of where your cable is. I would do them where your purl stitches are between the cables, so you can adjust them back and forth to fit in those areas. Great question. I love it. Nano and question. Do we subtract our number of cast on stitches from our final stitch count at the outer circumference of the yoke and then divide those increased stitches evenly into the 4 increase rounds? Yes. Now, Ann Bud has not. I worked that out in I documented it because I knew somebody was going to ask that. So let me tell you for my example what she did. I'm doing mine a 42 inch. Okay. So she has to do the 4 rounds, and for mine at a stitch gauge of 7 stitches to the inch, is size 42. In the first increase round, she has you increase 60 stitches, and then the next 3, 90 stitches each. But you could have just divided all of the increase. The increase is 332. You could have just divided it by 3. It would work just fine that way. I mean, divided it by 4 would be fine. For me, I'm increasing. I have to increase 332 stitches. So the first round, I increased 100, but just because it worked out really good for me. And then I'm increasing 115 on the next two increase rounds because it fits into my stitch pattern. And so you have that leeway of moving those increases a little bit depending on how your stitch pattern goes. And we'll talk about my stitch pattern in a minute. I need to finish my questions here. Question 3 from Anne, the last. I want my cable pattern to continue until I decrease just under bust. You said it's not pretty to go on pattern after 1 inch under bust. Do you think my idea is suitable for a yoke? So you want to decrease just under bust. You could go past the bust, yes, but not with your increases. And I wouldn't make my cables end here, but if you can continue down, yes, that would be fine. I want my cable pattern to I decrease just under bust. Yes, because you're putting a design down here, right? Under your bust, you're putting a sideways cable down here. That would look just fine. That would look fine. I can't wait to see your sweater. It's going to be so pretty. Vicky says, I have a 41-inch bust and a 10-inch upper arm. Will you show us how to adjust the stitch count to accommodate my small upper arm? Yes. Now that, remember in the knit along document, I tell you to use your arm plus your ease, 2 arms plus ease, and your chest plus ease. And then you add all that together, the circumference, right? And you subtract 8% 4 times. 8% here, 8% here, 8%, 8. And that gives you your total yoke. In the next segment that comes out, part 3, I will talk to you exactly how to divide which stitches go off for the arms. So the way that I've written it now in the current knit along covers everybody. Now, some people who have a really big bust, they're going to want to have more of their sweater up here and less in the back. Easily doable. Easily doable. All of that can be accommodated once we finish the yoke and then we start talking about the body and the arms. Okay? So that comes next. If you use the calculations over in my knit along or even Ann Budd's book, but then you have to talk about the differences, arm size and the bust. So if you're having a difference right now, use what I say in the book. I do have a video in the works for showing you that in Ann Budd's book, how to do that too. Okay? Okay. Bonnie Davis wants to know if I'll do a future sweater in the swing style. It's not on my list right now. And I'm not adding it right now, but I might consider it later. Okay, right now I'm a year out in thinking what I'm doing. So that's enough for me for right now. Marlene Kern question, can you use cables in the yoke that radiate out like spokes? And can you carry the ones that radiate out from the top of the shoulder down the sleeves? Yes. Yes, you can do that. In fact, that yellow sweater that I wear all the time is radiate. It's not cables. But it's ribbing that radiates out. Yes, that would be stunning. It would be absolutely gorgeous. Question from Deborah. Can you make a video on the pattern in the lace and bead yoke that you just showed? I bought the yoke tutorial and would like to make a yoke like that one. Like this? With doing the holes? Yes, I can make a video on making that. Let me add that. So I understood what you said there. Yeah, it took me a second. Let me write that down. So we're going to do the eyelet, garter, stitch pattern video. Yes, I will do that. Great suggestion. Thank you. Okay. Ron Warren says, a new calculator with percentage-based ease is coming soon, and the percentages may only affect the measurements Suzanne just mentioned. Okay, I think that's on Ron's website. That would be very cool. Claudia says, question, what if I want my sweater oversized after my bust point and down, but fit normally everywhere else? That's a great question. You know, there's a designer called Vera Sannon, and I think she's Sun Fun Living on Ravelry. And I've taken classes with her, and she says if you make the shoulders fit, if this part fits you, you can do whatever you want down here and it'll look good. She says just make this part fit. And that's what I really talk about too. If you get this part fitting, everything else will look good. You can make this as big as you want and it'll look good because it's hanging off of you nicely. Okay? Great question. Kathy says, question, if you use yarn over for the increases, would you not knit two together in between? If you're using them for increases, no. because you want to add a stitch. The yarn over is adding a stitch. If you want to just make that little eyelet design, then you need to make a yarn over, knit two together, yarn over, knit two together. That's just the design, and it's not going to make any increases. Okay, there's a difference. One is a stitch pattern, the other is an increase method. If you're just increasing, just eyelets, yarn overs, no knit two togethers. If you want to make that little stitch design, that's just a stitch pattern. It's not an increase round. Okay, Janice Mason, question, do you have an address for the knit calculator to distribute the increased stitches? Somebody needs to post that. I don't have that, and we'll post that on Ravelry if that's okay. Claudia, question, is there a way to fix a stretched out finished neck? I'm asking because I'm making this vig and I think the neck's going to end too wide. What I would do is I'd very carefully unpick the cast on edge and pick those stitches up, and I'd even take out maybe the whole little ribbing section here. Take it out. You're going to have to unpick it one stitch at a time, and then put these live stitches on and then knit back up and make some decreases if you want to make it fit. Okay. I think this Daytona Gordon Pearson's going to go away. Okay. What make one did you use? Vicki, I already talked about that. I used to make one right. That's my default make one. You could use make one left. Doesn't matter. For something like this, it just doesn't matter. Doesn't need to be directional. This is from Wheezy Wheezy. I don't get to watch you live because of work and the 3-hour time difference. I'd like to thank you for your awesome videos and chats. You've made my projects more polished. Thank you. That's exactly why I do this, because otherwise there's nothing in it for me other than just doing videos. But thank you, thank you, thank you. Makes me feel good. Question. I haven't done the Ravelry questions yet. That's coming up next. I need to finish these, and I want to show you one more thing about my yoke. This is probably going to be an hour and a half. I hate that, but that's what it's going to be. This is Anita B. How do I measure myself if I have nobody to help me? Well, you can do your neck. You can do your bust. You can do your length from the upper shoulder down to however long you want it to be on the front of your body. You can do all those. You can do your upper arm yourself. The ones that are hard are the underarm, but I even could do that myself. I put this under here, under my arm, or this is how you can do the underarm yourself. Take a string. Take a string. Wrap it around your underarm. From the top of your shoulder, use this part of your shoulder right here. Bring the string together. Measure that string. Now you have to remove the part that's under your armpit. So just remove 2 inches or 8% of your body circumference. Okay, and that gives you your armhole depth. Or you can just lay a shirt out on your bed, one that you think fits you good, and measure it. That's the other way to do it. Anne says, and it looks like I'm almost done with the online questions, says, Rupert Murdoch's going away. Report. Okay, so where was I? This is question. Could you give us a pattern for how to work a brioche yoke? Let me think about it. Okay, I'll think of something. Andrew Muller's question. Sorry, one more. For the neck, could we imagine a double neck or starting at the beginning and one adjusting after using the same row as the beginning of the pocket itag cardigan? Yes, you could. Yep, you could make a double neck that way. And then you could do the Kitchener bind off. I have that video on doing a double pickup. It's kind of like that. Okay, great question. I like the way you think. You think like me. Question from Sandra. Question: if you use make ones, do you do half as make one right and half as make one left? No, they don't. It's in this type of where you're increasing so quickly together, you don't want to create a design element. If you do half of them as make one right and half of them as make one left, it is going to make a design element. But it's personal preference. You can do that if you want. Go ahead and try it. It's fine with me. It's probably not going to show a difference. Okay, now I'm going to go to the other questions, okay? There aren't very many, so we're good on that. So this is from Susan Maloney. She says, I'm trying to make a short sleeve summer top. I want the neck to scoop a little in the front, but not be wide at the top of the shoulders. I watched a video for adding neck shaping short rows to the yoke neckline by Maria Zuxina, and she linked the text where she talks about adding the short rows after the neck's lace pattern. She starts the shaping on the front side, not just across the back of the neck. Is it going to make a big difference if the neck short rows are at the back neck edge or at the yoke lace pattern? And will this create a slightly scooped neckline? It will create a slightly scooped neckline. And I think what you're going to need to do is swatch both methods and see which one you like best with your lace pattern. I think that's the answer to that. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Swatching's good. She has another question. My lace pattern has bobbles. She doesn't really like bobbles. Is there something that can replace it? Noops. Noops are wonderful. I love noops. I also have a video on 3 different styles of bobbles. It might be just your style of bobble that you don't care for. There are a lot of different ways to do bobbles, but noops tend to lay flatter, but give you that little elemental little bump effect that you want there, okay? Let's see, this is from Demetria. I'm making wedges and adding the increases slowly. Do I stop increasing when I get to the shoulder edge, or do I make major increases there? I think this is the answer to that question. Is you stop the increases when you're halfway to your depth of your yoke, which this is about the shoulder right here. This is what you're going to do, Dimitri. You're going to make the increases on these lines. Now, they don't have to be exactly in a line. They can kind of zigzag back and forth, but they need to be made between here and here. Okay? That's a good question. And that's similar to what I'm doing mine the other way. I have a question about the neck. The only sweater I did until now was a yoked one, and it started with the finished neck. It means I do not need to come back to it and pick up stitches, because I somehow cannot imagine how you knit this part afterwards. Would it be possible to start with a finished neck? I would also like it to be a bit more open, a bit like your t-shirt that from the last video. You say it's better to come to the neck later. Try either way. Try one way. Just pick one way and do it this time, and the next way, try it the other way and see which one you like better. I've done it both ways. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's hard to say what's going to be best for you. Just go with it, experiment. Every sweater to me is an experiment. I learn everything I do, I learn something new. This is from Katharina Knits 2. Suggestion, maybe there could be a topic about swatching. There we could share and discuss our experiences and ideas. Swatching seems to be worth it. I think that's a great idea. I love swatching. Maybe I would have Delise make a topic in our Ravelry group just for swatching. This is from Danasty. She says, I'm assuming there'll be a video for picking up the provisional stitches and finishing the neck. Yes, there will be. Will there be a video for doing short rows on the provisional cast on? I'm curious if we can start the beginning of round whenever we want, or if there's an ideal place to begin if we're working short rows off the provisional. I answered this right in the beginning. I would do 1 round of plain knits before you do after the provisional. Provisional, 1 round of plain knits, then do your short rows. I marked the center front for mine because it's easier to figure out where you're doing the short rows based upon the center front. So it's up to you. You can have your beginning of round be wherever you want it to be. So we're almost done with the questions, and I want to show you one more thing, okay? David Hensley. Did you once tell us that there are yarn shops that charge dollars to answer questions? Yes, many yarn stores. If you want to go in and learn something, if you have a question, oftentimes they'll charge you even $10 to answer your question. There are lots of yarn stores that do that, some that don't. So yes, that does happen. So I want to show you something. So in my book, I've answered all the questions. I'm not going to answer anymore. It's a cutoff. Okay, that's the cutoff. No more questions. In my book, it's in green ink, so you can't really see it. I did a lot of calculations. So what I had to do is I wanted to figure out where I was going to put this, right? And so I did my measurements that I talked about, and I decided I want to have it end 1 inch above my armpit. So then I have to decide where I want it to begin. And I'm doing my increase rounds. I divided it into 3 sections. So I already have 1 increase round here. My next increase round is going to be about right here. Then that leaves my 3rd increase round is actually going to be worked from here to about here. See, this is my full depth right here. So I want all my increase rounds to end by here, okay? So this is my 2nd increase round. Between here and here, I'm going to be adding stitches in this part to finish off my total increases before I get to the halfway point. So I figured out that I need to make the distance between here and here. This is 1 pattern repeat. From here to here, it's 28 stitches. I need to start this with 22 stitches in order for it to fit. 6 stitches less. So I'll be adding those 6 stitches in this area right in here, so that they'll all be added in and fitting in with my design. I may have to change my design elements a little bit in here to make it fit, but all 6 of those increases are going to be fitting between here and here. So I could put 3 over here and 3 over here for every pattern multiple going around. Then it will turn out that it'll be exactly like this at the bottom. So this is 28 stitches wide. So I wanted it to fit even, and I have to make it 22 at this point, right? I figured out I have to have 22 stitches for it to fit. So I add my 6 in. So I have to have multiples of 22 around my sweater. Well, it turned out that I had 16.76 multiples around my sweater, not 17, which is, I didn't have 16 or 17. I had 16.76. So I needed to add like 9 stitches to make it work, or something like that. I don't remember the exact number. So in my 2nd increase round, I added those stitches in so that by the time I get to the 3rd one, where I'm going to be starting here, I have enough stitches for my motif to fit in there evenly all the way around. Now, because I'm steeking down the center, I need to also pay attention to where my motifs are. I don't want them lopsided from the center, right? So I'm going to center one in the back. So this is where I need to know my beginning of round is here, and I'm going to center a motif to the back. And then when they come around, there will probably be a half a motif here and a half a motif here to make a whole motif, because I did it for whole motifs, right? But that's okay, because they'll be symmetrical. Now, in the case, let's say there's a big stitch difference to make my multiples fit, and you're doing a cardigan, it's okay. All you have to do is center your motif to the back, figure out how it's going to come around, and if there's partial motifs on either side of the front, that's okay. It looks fine. It'll look fine with a button band to have partial motifs on either side. You do not have to have a full motif. But let's say you want a full motif. Then you're going to have to figure out the exact stitch count that you need for a full motif to fit on each side. And then that may not turn out that this one's in the center. Maybe it's halfway between 2 motifs. It's the center back. There's all those variables in between. Does that make sense? Are you understanding what I'm saying? Okay, so I'm going to be having 22 stitches for each one of my 28 stitch wide motifs, and I'm going to make increases right in here and right in here in the first few rows. Then I'll have my full 28 stitches. So this will go around like this, just like that. And that's where I'm going to stop. Well, I'll knit another inch to my armpit, and that's where I'll stop. And that's where we're going to pick up next time. So does this give you food for thought? Now, be sure to invite your friends. I'm going to try to make these videos so that they're applicable to anybody who wants to knit a yoke sweater. although I'm answering specific questions about the itag-yoke, but I wanted to conduct these so that they'll be meaningful to a lot of people. So invite your friends to sign up for my channel, okay? Invite them to subscribe and become one of my followers. Right now, I think I have somewhere between 800 and 900 subscribers for this channel. I just passed 37,000 on my other channel. Woohoo! Celebration! And I have about 2,000 hours of watching so far, of people watching this channel. I need 4,000 before I can start getting monetary gain. But at that point, it's very small. It'll be like $10 a month or so. But every little bit I use for my yarn. Yay! So did you have fun? Was this good? Did you learn? Did I answer your questions? If so, the next time we'll be on here will be Sunday at 2 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. And put your questions on Ravelry. Did anybody notice this Facebook doesn't seem to be working today? Now, I haven't tried since we've been on here, but I was trying to answer people's questions earlier this morning, and I couldn't post. It would say there was an error. Did anybody else have that problem? Okay, give me a thumbs up. Post your questions on the video once it's over, if you didn't get to put your questions in already. Leslie Dunn said, yes, she had the Facebook problem too. So we'll let you go. Happy knitting. I hope to see some progress on people starting. I am going to start a thread actually on Ravelry, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I'm knitting my sweater, so you can see step by step what I'm going through. Okay? So you take care. Happy knitting, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.